Hello, hello, hello. Jack here. Thank you for watching and or listening to the DIY Musician Podcast. Today, we are talking all about sync licensing. And our friend Chris SD from Sync Songwriter was kind enough to join me and discuss all things about sync licensing. He is the go-to guy for independent musicians when it comes to sync licensing. And he has introduced many a musician to his network of friends, music supervisors, and he's helped so many artists get their songs synced in film, commercials, and that sort of thing. So if you're interested in sync, this is the episode for you. We talk all about how we should be approaching sync. Should we be writing songs for sync or not? Should we have our metadata dialed in? Yes, we should. And how do we do that? All these different topics around sync. Chris is so knowledgeable about it. And so it was so fun to talk to him. I really hope you enjoy, and I will let it roll. Let's go.
You're listening
to the CD Baby
Baby
DIY
Musician
Podcast.
Hey, Chris.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. Thanks for asking, Jack.
Right on, man.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me. I've been really looking forward to this.
Cool. Yeah, me too. I mean, this is great. We've I haven't crossed paths with you specifically, but CD Baby and I have always like done a little bit of this and all of that. So this is the first time we get to hop on here and do something.
Nice. Yeah. I've been following you and Sync Songwriter for a while. And so, not to sound creepy, but I almost feel like I already know you.
Well, that's, it's funny how that works. It's like a one-way street, for me, unfortunately, is that it's really hard. I wish we were all sitting around a campfire, hanging out, getting to know each other. But it's just the nature of, publishing stuff and, being sort of the spokesman is that you send a one-way message and people get to know you, but you don't get to know them as well. So
yeah, totally. Do you still live on a boat?
We still have the boat. So what we decided to do was basically get a place up here in the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee to sort of balance out ocean life. So we still have the boat and we're going to be doing a lot of sailing and stuff like that, but we're splitting our time essentially between, this place and the boat kind of thing.
Nice. Yeah. I feel like I've fantasized about living on a boat, but it does seem, I'm sure there's lots of pros and cons. My friends lived on a boat in Morro Bay for a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
And seeing them have it to like drive their little dinghy back to land from their boat just to do anything, I'm like, ooh, that seems like there's a lot of tough things about it.
Yeah. It's funny. A lot of people say, it's living the dream, and there can't be anything wrong with your life, right? That's the ultimate goal. It's like, no, you pick your poison, and there's certainly disadvantages to living on a boat. But the advantages for us are far outweigh the disadvantages.
Yeah.
And, taking the dinghy to shore to get stuff for me, I actually like that, it sort of makes you be a bit more minimalist because you can only bring back a certain number of things. It's just kind of fun, to
Totally.
motor out to your home on the water and love the idea of moving your home like whenever you want to, it's like you basically, it's like you have $1 million views without having to spend millions of dollars every night, which is kind of cool. And I guess lastly is just the act of sailing. I just love harnessing the wind. It's like you're on one hand at the wind's mercy, and on the other hand, you're basically cajoling her into doing your bidding. So
Totally.
Fun.
Yeah. Well, listen, I'm really excited to talk about sync licensing today. And I know you're kind of like one of the go-to guys for independent musicians when it comes to learning and getting into sync licensing. So I guess my first question, I think would be really interesting to hear, like, what's your musical journey and what kind of led you to becoming sort of a go-to sync person?
Yeah, sure. So basically, long story short, in a nutshell, as best I can, I'm originally from Canada and started off as a music producer and had the good fortune of working on records that won awards. They're Junos or the Grammys for Canada. And so had some success there. And that led me to getting a green card to go to LA. So went down to Los Angeles and basically started producing records there. And my daughter was born when I was down there, and I just didn't want to be in studios 10 to 14-hour days anymore. Wanted to be around. And one of the things that I kept getting asked as a music producer when I was in Toronto and starting was like, how do I get my music out there in like a, bigger way, especially for independent musicians? Because we would be like in situations where, I'd work with major label artists and I'd also work with indie artists. And indie artists, they had less of a budget. They didn't also have the labels and the managers and agents propelling them along. So my job was to try to figure out, like, how do I make this record, do better? It was a little bit selfish, honestly, too, because I was like, man, I'm putting my blood, sweat, and tears into this. And we all want this to do well. And so often the band would get all excited, go out, go on tour, and, just kind of crickets, right, with the record. So I basically, my girlfriend at the time, wife now, basically was working in licensing with the management company. It's one of the duties that she did there. And I kind of got into that scene too and got to know supervisors and realized this is such a great way to get music out there in such a big way. So when I got to Los Angeles, I sort of kept building that idea and building upon the network of supervisors that I knew. And eventually, just trying to help indie artists I was working with, and eventually figured out, I really should get this out to more independent musicians. And so that's when I started Sync Songwriter, and was able to basically directly introduce independent artists and independent songwriters who are just maybe at home writing songs or whatever. And they think, man, people have told me this might sound good in a show, movie, or ad. And then what I do is I introduce them directly to the movers and shakers in Hollywood, the people who put the music into TV and film. So that's what I do at Sync Songwriter.
Oh, wow. So you're not only teaching them sync, but you're actually introducing them to the people, the decision makers.
Yeah, that's the biggest part, honestly, because ultimately, I mean, there's so much out there, right, where you can learn about licensing and stuff. And there's a lot that's wrong, but there's some good ones too. I didn't really see a need to only just teach musicians. We'll talk about this in a bit, because just learning how to license music is not enough, because it honestly is kind of like playing a lottery if you don't have a roadmap, or you don't understand how to do it, or you don't have the actual connections or relationships. And that's where a big part of what I do comes in.
Yeah, that was one of my questions was, how important is networking when it comes to sync and knowing maybe sync licensing agents or music supervisors? I mean, I imagine that's a big part of it.
Yeah, I would say that is a massive part of it, right? Because there's the whole thing is based on relationships. So, anybody that's listening to this right now can say, hey, I can go out and go into a music library or I can get a sync agent. And they'll do that for you. They already have the relationship. So you literally, right when we're done here, you can jump online, find some non-exclusive libraries. You can jump into them, and you can upload your music. You got to sign a terms of agreement, terms of use, and all that. And then a sync agent, if you can get one to sign you, they'll, while you're sleeping, they're pitching your music and doing that. So that sounds great, right? Why don't you just do that? Why do I even exist? Why am I even around? The thing is that when you're in a library or when you're with an agent, if we're honest right now, everyone and their dog has a record out, like everyone has an album. And so they're all trying, a fraction of them, which is a massive fraction, millions of artists, trying to get their music into TV and film. So then multiply that by the number of songs that they have. And you start to see, like, if you look at the Paramount library, they have 4 million plus tracks in there. You've got other libraries with hundreds of thousands or millions of tracks. So you're really just a lifeboat floating in an ocean, hoping a boat comes by and rescues you. You're playing a lottery. You're a needle in a haystack. So that's why you hear so few sync placements through libraries and sync agents, at least from your peers, right? Most anybody it doesn't happen. So I realized that early on. It's great for the supervisor and it's great for the actual library or agent, because the supervisor, when they come to them, they say, hey, I'm looking for a song. So the owner of the library, the agent say, oh, okay, no problem. I've got lots, right? I got millions of songs here. I could find you something. So they put together a little playlist and they send it to the supervisor. Supervisor says, oh, this is great. I'm going to take this to the showrunners and see if they want to use it. The showrunners being the director and the producer of the shows, and so they do that, and maybe a sync placement happens, and the supervisor comes back to the owner of the library or the agent and says, you are awesome. That's great. The supervisor doesn't know the artist. So one of the things one of the biggest problems is that you want to have relationships with the people who can make it happen. And so getting that through, sync agents and libraries is one way to do it. But of course, they have millions of people on their roster. So it's like a lottery, right? Playing a lottery. There's millions of people potentially in these places. So ideally what you want to have is those direct relationships with the actual people who do it. Go around the middleman, because the middleman takes a huge chunk of your money anyway. They're the ones who build the relationships with the supervisors, not you. So I was always of the idea, like, the indie musician should be the one who's talking to the music supervisor. They should have that. But the big problem is that supervisors are people, and everybody wants to get their music into TV and film. So they're inundated with music. And I'm not talking about the public even, right? Because they have a wall around them. They go to their go-to people and usually just sort of like, lock everybody else out, because they simply can't deal with everything, right? They can't listen to everything that's sent to them. They get tons and tons and tons of tracks. Those tracks are just from their go-to people. Those are like publishers and labels and agents and libraries and friends of theirs and bands that they like to. So there's within their go-to group, they're already getting a ton of music. So you need to basically become one of those go-to people, but on the front burner. Have a priority where they know, oh, you know what? I love dealing with that person. Their music's great. It fits what I'm working on. And, I know dealing with them is going to be super easy, and they understand sync licensing. So that's where the learning part of what I do comes in.
So you're saying that there is still a way to directly have relationships with music supervisors. You don't have to necessarily have a sync licensing agent, or is it maybe advised to first start with an agent and then start building your relationships through that?
Well, you can't start with an agent and then build your relationships that way. Unfortunately, because the agent doesn't really want you to build the relationships, because they are the middleman. A middle person really doesn't, And so the idea is that if you're going to basically try to get through to supervisor, you've got to do it on your own. But the challenge is that there's a lot of people who try to do that. They try to cold email. They try to, jump on some social thing to connect with them. They might fly out to conferences to connect and so on. And those are all super inefficient, right? They're not great ways of doing it. So what I do is I literally take the artists, and then, because the supervisor, I know tons and tons of supervisors and I work with them all the time. My members and students have gotten tons of sync placements with them. They trust me. I'm a trusted go-to person. So I'm on the front burner with them. I can simply introduce the indie artists that I'm working with directly. I get out of the way directly to the supervisors.
Yeah, that sounds super helpful. Yeah, because I have been hearing that more and more. It's just music supervisors just constantly DM. There's just no way you're going to get through.
Well, that's why. Yeah, and that's why musicians just don't get responses from them, because the supervisors just can't.
Yeah, totally. And I imagine too. So once you've been able to build those relationships, kind of knowing what's being produced right now, what's in production for movies, commercials, that sort of thing. I imagine that's an important aspect of then pitching your music, because you know that you have something that will fit, something that's not out yet. Do you have any tips around that sort of research?
Yeah, totally. You really hit on something there, Jack. It's super important to target your music, because if you don't, you're using a shotgun approach, right? You're just sort of throwing a spaghetti against the wall, see what sticks. And the problem with that is that what you don't want to do is if you get a connection with a supervisor and you're able to actually get your music to them and get them to listen to it, which is really, really hard. But if you're able to do that and finally have that happen, what you don't want to do is just send them songs. No matter how good the song is, they can't use it if it's not relevant to what they're working on. And so they're actually going to, even if you've got like an amazing song, they're, they might say like, well, I can take this and file it away in case something happens, but I don't really work on stuff like that. So you probably never hear from them again. You're kind of wasting their time also, because you're kind of making them listen to something that's not relevant for what they're looking for, because they're very, very busy, right? They've got to turn things around quickly. They've got to get specific kinds of music into specific spots in the productions that they're working on. So one way to do that, you want to think about it like a piece of pie, right? And say divide it into 10 slices. You want to be in the slice where it matters, right? So the way to go about this, there's two ways. I'll talk about what I call targeting, and I teach it in depth. There's one little quick, easy method I can tell you about here. But when you're trying to sort of decide like, how do I even think about targeting or getting my music to supervisors? There's two ways to go. One is you can write music for TV and film. So you can listen to, a show or a movie and say, like, I would really love to be in that. There's a sequel of the movie coming out, or I want to be in the next season of the show. They're going to renew it. And I listen to the music, and I'm going to write something and produce something that's like that. And I'm going to shoot for that show. Okay. So that's one way of doing it. And production music, that's a big part of what production music does, is they try to produce things they think that the TV and film people are going to want. I am a little bit less of that. I support it and I teach you how to do it, but I'm less enthused by that, because the number one thing that supervisors say that they want, and this is really refreshing to songwriters in general, is they want authenticity. And that is the number one thing that keeps coming back. They want something that feels and sounds authentic, that's going to really move the emotion right on the screen of what's going on. They want that to kind of really happen, for the viewers and all of that emotion. And so, some people might be good at faking it. Some people can get away with doing that. But most often, if you write from your heart, and specifically, if you write the things that you're good at, if you're in your genius zone, you're writing your own genre, your own style, about your own experiences, it comes across as authentic, because it is. And so as opposed to looking at shows and movies and ads and saying, this is what they want, this is what I'm going to write, you write what you write, make it great and authentic, and then find the targets for that. So it's just the reverse, right? And so one of the ways you can do that is you can go to a website called TuneFind, TuneFind.com, TuneFind.com. And you can go, and it basically lists most of the shows that have, ever been around. And they list all the music that has been placed in those shows. It shows you exactly what artist, what song, and what episode it was in, and even the order it was in. And you can go, and if you sound like a certain artist, for example, right, you can figure that out online. You can go to a website and type in similar artists to your music, say I sound like this, type that into the search engine. It'll spit out some results for you of other artists you sound similar to. Then go to their music and listen and say, oh, do I actually sound like with them or not? Make a list, and then go find those artists in TuneFind. Where have they been placed before? Where are they happening? And you'll see a pattern. You're like, wow, these artists have gotten into these kinds of shows, or this supervisor who's working on the show tends to play stuff like mine. That is a great target for you.
Interesting. Yeah. Because I've been on IMDb before trying to do some research. I think I even did like a free trial of their paid. Are there any paid tools that are worth even investing in? No.
Nope. The paid version of IMDb is not. You don't need that at all. It's really for the industry. That you're not going to gain anything from that. IMDb is mainly going to be the part where you're looking for the supervisor, right? So once you've gone to TuneFind, you found the show that you're trying to get into, then go to IMDb and type the show in, like find the show, and then go and try to figure out who the supervisor is. And that's how you find out who that is. Now, of course, the huge hurdle here is then you've got to contact them. And we're back to what I was talking about before. 99% chance you won't hear from them, because if you just email them out of the blue, you've got to have a relationship to get through to them.
Right. Now, does the same apply for like video games and other placements?
That's a great question. I don't specialize in video games.
Gotcha.
It's awesome. I've had members, like a few of them, who have come through, my signature course, The Art of the Song Pitch, and they've gone on to do amazing things in video games. In fact, I have one who's won awards a couple of years in a row. She's a composer, and she's done like amazing video game soundtrack stuff. And she even got her song into the trailer of Annihilation, the movie that came out, a few years ago, whatever. And so, yeah, totally doable. I just don't know a whole lot about that world, unfortunately.
Yeah, I imagine it's knowing the person that, I don't know if they're called music supervisors on video games, but whoever places the music, building those relationships and them trusting you, right?
Correct.
One of the things that you mentioned was their music supervisors are often in a hurry, or they need to do something pretty quick. How important is it for a musician to sort of have their ducks in a row and be able to move quickly?
Very, very important. So sometimes I get the question like, hey, if I send them a demo, if I'm able to even hook up with them and, get in a conversation, and I send them a demo, can they tell me, what they want, and I can go and actually record the song and then send it to them? The answer typically is absolutely not. Like they need the master right now kind of thing. The turnaround time in TV and film is like super tight. So you kind of have to have your master ready. Now, if you get a relationship with music supervisors, and I don't mean a connection, I mean a real relationship where you can pick up the phone if you want and talk to them, and they like what you do, and they send you their briefs, which are like basically synopsises of what they're looking for, and say, hey, do you have something? Meaning you're on their go-to list and you get that, which is exactly what I provide indie songwriters. Then in that moment, they might call you ahead of time and say, hey, I've placed however many of your songs. It's been great. I know you do this really, really well, right? You're like, you do meditation music super well, or Americana, or like I love your pop, approach, right? And that's the other thing, just quickly, it doesn't matter what kind of music you make, there's a home for it, because the sync industry is huge. So you don't have to be in country, hip hop, and pop and rock. Those are the big four. You can do kind of anything. Korean hip hop, it doesn't matter. You'll find a home if you do your targeting right. So the bottom line is you need your master ready. It has to be ready to get into TV and film right away. And but once you get that relationship, they may call you ahead of time and say, hey, I'm working on this movie. It's not going to start production for a bit. We're looking for this kind of thing. Can you write something, And I have students and members of Sync Songwriter who have had exactly that same thing. They've been asked to write songs, like, can you write 4 songs for this movie coming out? And that's what's happened. But that comes with the relationship. But typically fast turnaround, essentially.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And, I was thinking about the whole authenticity thing. It's funny. I feel like a broken record because almost every interview that I've done, like, it's come back around that even outside of sync, like, being authentic is really like the moment where people have an aha moment, or they're getting traction, stuff like that. And it sounds like, because like you said, the sync world is so large, there's so many different needs that there's no reason to write for something specific, because you can be, it's like your ticket to be authentic, because there's so many other, that's how you'd want to approach it. And so that's sort of the songwriting side. What about the production side? Should we be thinking about sync from a production standpoint? Is there anything different there, or is that also just be yourself? And
no, that's a great question. There are some things now with songwriting and production. There are some goalposts. There's some things, there's like lines on the field that you got to stay within, right, to stay in the game. And it doesn't mean that, as I was saying before, you don't have to write for sync. You don't have to produce specifically for sync. There's not a bunch of things that, you got to tick off these 10 things, because if you don't do them, you're not getting into TV and film. It's not like that. But there are certain more things about what not to do, right? It's like kind of like staying, it's like a good thing is like you think of a soccer field, right? Is like anywhere in the lines, you can kind of do what you want within the rules of the game, right? We don't know how the game's going to go. But everyone knows as soon as you kick the ball outside the lines, the game stops, right? That's what you got to think about with sync and production. So there's a bunch of stuff. We don't have time to get into them all here. These are things I teach in Sync Songwriter. But the bottom line is, like, an example is that when you're considering, your mix, mid-range information is really important to understand, because when they play your music, especially under dialogue, say in a movie, and there's the actors are talking, the human voice is in the mid-range. And that's where our ears are actually most sensitive, probably for that reason, because we, have gone through the millennia of talking to each other, and we've, our hearing is attuned to those frequencies. So really what it comes down to is that you've got to make sure that you're not getting in the way. Now, you don't want to go and scoop your mix. You don't want to like, well, I'm going to create a pocket there for the dialogue because that'll sound weird, right? In the mix. But you want to always be conscious of like, what are my instrument choices? What are the frequency ranges that are happening in the mix? And again, like I said, these are goalposts. These are like, doesn't mean you can't do like a mid-range sort of mix. It just means you've got to be aware, of like, what? I'm kind of going over the top here. Another one is the level of your vocal. So a radio mix, the idea of the vocal, which is usually the part of the music people connect with most, A&R people back in the day, especially, were always like, vocal up, and we always did vocal up mixes for radio and stuff like that. And that works great. And that's awesome. In sync licensing, again, with the actors, the storyline, and the dialogue, they don't want a vocal competing with that, right? And they want the music to tell the story more than the vocal often. So your vocal can be in there, and they'll use your instrumental only version sometimes. They'll chop between the two. But when you're doing a sync mix, you want to kind of put the vocal back in the mix just a little bit. Now, I'm not talking radically. No, you don't want to bury it. You still got to understand everything that you're saying. But you want to, instead of doing like a vocal up, you're doing kind of a vocal down, or maybe just leaving it where it is when you mixed it. Just so the music is sort of your vocal is in the music, so that it's not sticking out too far and things like that. And there's like a bunch of other things that can go into, but there's definitely some production do's and don'ts for sure.
Interesting. Yeah. Super interesting. Is there, there might not be a rule of thumb here, but one thing I'll tell you that's kind of held me back, or I've sort of waited a little bit to dive fully in and into sync, is I don't have a ton of songs released yet. I have like 5 or 6. And I have plans for more and more. Is there a rule of thumb like, hey, you should probably have, or either a certain cadence of every couple of months you're releasing a song, or you should have at least a catalog of 10 or more, or is any rules of thumb there?
No, none.
Okay.
No, it's
so
always.
I shouldn't hold back.
Yeah, no, it's always all the supervisor cares about is the song. They honestly, they honestly don't even care about your backstory that much at the beginning, of course. So when you first, they're just literally focused on the song. They're like, will this work for what I'm working on? And so it's always quality over quantity. So always pick quality over quantity. If you've got one song, I had a student join, and she brought me an iPhone recording of her song and her vocal. And I took that into my studio because I still have an online studio, produced it. We've gotten lots of music into TV and film and stuff. And she ended up with 4 sync placements, and, the story continues.
Wow.
She had one song. So, yeah. And the beautiful thing about licensing is you can license that song over and over and over and over again in different things. You don't have to just be like, oh, I got it licensed, nobody wants it now. No, you can get it in tons of stuff. The moment when things really blew open for indie artists and the industry woke up to the idea of like, hey, we could save a bunch of money instead of paying like Van Halen $100,000. We could pay this indie artist $10,000 who, and use their song. We should do that. Was when Moby came out with that huge record of his, right? And it was one record. It must have made him a millionaire easily. The number of syncs he got out of that record were incredible. And there was 10 or 12 tracks on there. So you only need, you don't have to have 20 songs. You could have 2. But of course, right? Of course, the more, the better if they're quality, but that's the trick. They got to be good songs. Yeah,
the odds are better. If you have a variety, you can pitch a lot of different things and go into different genres. Yeah, sure. So you're still producing?
Yeah. I have an online studio, and it's called Sundown Sessions Studio. And basically, I moved my production online, got a team together, and we produce music that wins song contests, gets publishing deals and label deals into TV and film and all that stuff. So
how fun! Yeah, so you're totally fully in it still. That's great.
Oh yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I'm going to shift gears a little bit. One of the things that we kind of stress at CD Baby from a technical standpoint is metadata. And so I was wondering, is metadata a big important thing in sync as well?
Yeah, it's huge. So just to clarify what we use metadata for and what supervisors use it for is that the first thing, of course, is to categorize the music, right? So that they know what it is, and there's certain things you need to fill out in your metadata to help a supervisor do their job. And so that's kind of like one thing. The other thing, which is sounds smaller, but it's really, really more important, is so that they can contact you. Like, it is crazy the number of times I've heard from supervisors being like, yeah, I got this, song, and I couldn't use it right away. And then I kept it. And then about 2 weeks, 2 months, a year later, whatever, I decided I wanted to use it because I remembered it and I thought it was great and it would fit perfect for this thing. And I got it, and I was, going to bring it into the showrunners, and we're going to like put it in the movie. And there was no contact information in the metadata. I didn't know who it was. And I'm too busy to look it up or go back to find the email or find the communication or who it came through or how it got to me. So I just move on to the next one. So yeah,
that hurts.
It's yeah. And the thing is that the people who have done that don't even know,
right? Because they couldn't contact them or whatever.
They just don't know. They're just like right now, they're just on their lives. Yeah, I guess that didn't work out. And it's like, do you know how close you came? And to maybe a huge blockbuster movie or something. So that's a big part of it. Now, we basically in the course and stuff, teach about exactly what you need to put in your metadata, nothing more, nothing less, because there's a lot of fields and things you can fill in and things like that. But we basically surveyed all the supervisors and said, they helped me build this little kind of thing, and I actually have a cheat sheet, that I'm very happy to offer the listeners, if they want to download it, just a free cheat sheet. You just download it. And you just pin it, on your wall, print it out. If you feel like it, keep it on a file on your desktop. Anytime you fill in your metadata, just go and just follow what's on there, and you're golden.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll link it to the bottom of this video.
Awesome. Sweet.
Yeah. Now, is there a program that you use? How do you add metadata to the song?
Yeah, so there's lots of different programs you can do it. Most DAWs have that facility that you're using. If you're on PC, iTunes still exists for PC. You can do it with that. There's a great app called TrackStage that does a lot of different things for sync that you can do that with. So there's a bunch. You just Google it and you can certainly find some.
Cool, sweet. Now, as far as negotiations go, once you have a music supervisor interested in your music, does the musician have any leverage there on negotiations, or is it usually like this is their budget and this is what you get?
Yeah, another great question. So there is room for negotiation, but the thing is that usually your approach from a music supervisor, they're usually telling you the truth. They're most often just saying, this is the budget we have for the song, and it can be like a sort of take it or leave it thing. Now, where the room for negotiation comes in, because you can always negotiate, even if they say that, you can still say, hey, very politely and diplomatically, you can say, it's a little less than I thought, and so on. Do you think there's any room to move on that? And they might say like, hey, I'll take it back to the showrunners, or I can go and figure it out and see if there is, because we really do want it. And maybe you can negotiate there. Of course, the bigger your reputation gets, the more placements you've had, the higher level, the bigger shows and movies and ads you're getting into, the more that negotiating part grows. Sometimes you may get, say, hey, we want to give you $500, which is not a lot of money for a sync placement, but maybe you've never had one. And maybe that placement is going to lead to a ton of things, because it's really important to remember that when you get a sync placement, all this cool stuff happens outside of the money, right? So in fact, arguably, it's more important. And so the first thing that happens is you get a sync fee up front. So that means it's a lump of dough that they give you and say, this is, thank you for licensing the song, letting us license your music. By the way, you keep all the copyright, you keep all the ownership of your song and everything. They're just literally licensing it from you for a specific use. That's all they're doing. Okay. So the contracts are generally straightforward, but you get the sync fee that you agreed on. It could be anywhere from free, maybe it's a student film or something, all the way up to six figures. You're getting into an ad, right? $100,000 or something, goes higher than that. And, our members have gotten like $30,000 for one sync placement, $20,000, $10,000. Yeah. And then, you know,
Are commercials usually more than film, or that can vary as well?
yeah, usually, well, it depends on the film. But usually commercials do pay more than, say, TV shows specifically, but they're a whole other can of worms. They're much more difficult to get into, and it involves a number of people that are actually involved in the process. So they're much, much more difficult to get. And that's why I always aim towards TV and film to start, and then ads, move up to ads. So the bottom line is you can negotiate, but at the beginning, sometimes it's better to take, you know, even a lower paying one, because as I was saying, you got that sync fee that you get up front, the lump of cash. Then you get back end royalties if it re-airs, right? Every time it re-airs. And then here comes the cool part. The other part is that you suddenly, when you're on a huge show that's got millions of viewers, you know, a network show, there's a fraction of those people who are Shazamming you, trying to find out, wow, what song is this? Because obviously they picked you because you worked well in the scene, and the scene moved the viewer. Like, I need that song, you know? And even that fraction out of millions of eyes and ears is going to be huge. Those people are all at once going to find you. So that's why it's really important to have your music out there. You know, you got to have it out there in places where they can find you, because you get that bump. Spotify playlists go up, all this, and then Spotify sees this bump happening. Their algorithm says, oh, let's promote more of your songs and put you more out there. And so all this stuff starts to happen. You can have labels come to you. You know, I've had people in Sync Songwriter that have done stuff like that. They've had huge success after one of them just found out, it was like last month, is getting an article in Billboard magazine, you know, one sync placement. So, you know, you can land in the charts basically. So that is the cool thing that happens with sync licensing. It can be amazing for your career that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's so little amount of money that you get from streaming generally too. So having that sort of moment of not only cash coming in, but a bump in help building your fan base. I mean, it's such it bumps everything up around the artist. Yeah, that's really cool. Are there any common mistakes that maybe that we haven't discussed yet that you see a lot of independent artists making when they're getting into this?
Yeah, I mean, some of those mistakes are the production levels, a big one. So you have to have decent production. You don't have to have great production. You have to just be above the threshold. And the threshold is everything that gets into TV and film. So, you know, a lot of people get the rose-colored glasses on, or what I call a kind of a term I coined, a demo-itis. So they do their demo, and then they listen to it over and over and over again. They play it for their friends, and they do this and that. And the demo starts to just take on a life of its own. And they start liking all the idiosyncrasies that they're going to fix. And they like all the stuff. And then when it comes time to do the real thing, they're like, no, my demo sounds great. Well, then they hand that to a supervisor, and the supervisor is like, this is a demo, you know? And so it's really important to get your production level. Now, how do you know, right? So here's an easy trick you can use that I recommend, is that you can basically take your mix, put it into a playlist with your heroes, with all the people that you love, or music that's similar that is on radio and popular, major label artists, and then put it in the playlist, put it on random, and then go do something, like go make dinner, so that you're not focused on it. You're still listening more than it being background, but you're kind of like distracted a bit, and just kind of let the playlist go by and just enjoy it as a listener. When your song comes along, gauge how you feel about your song when your track. If you're like, oh man, so that kind of sounds smaller, noikier, quieter, duller, just doesn't have what I thought it should have. The vocal, you know, wasn't recorded right. You're going to know it, but it's going to help you, right? Because now you know. You can
put it in
go
context.
Yeah, you can just go fix it. But if the playlist goes by and it's like, wow, that sounded awesome, mine fit right in there, you're golden, right? And
Cool.
so that's one. So that's one mistake. The other is being over zealous, trying to get a hold of supervisors and bugging them in places they shouldn't. You know, some people do things like jump on social or whatever, maybe LinkedIn, and start hitting up supervisors there. And that's a really good way to kind of get blacklisted, you know, where they're just like, anything that comes from you goes to the junk, because they're like, this is not the forum for me to be bugging me, you know. You got to figure out other ways of doing that. you know?
Mhm.
Another thing is not understanding all the things, which is why I teach people so much. There's 5 big steps that I teach in the Art of the Song Pitch, which is the flagship course I have. I teach them that because they need to know those things to properly communicate with supervisors, and most importantly, to get the supervisors to trust them. Supervisors inherently don't trust indie songwriters because they don't know that the songwriters know what's going on, right? So just one example of one of those things is like, you hand your song over to a supervisor, and the supervisor's job, half of it, is to clear the song, meaning to make sure that they can put it into a show, movie, or ad, and it be legally, everything's cool. Well, it gets in there, and then they find out later you forgot to mention, or that, oh, there's a sample I used from this other song, and now there's a big copyright fight, and the supervisor's going to get fired. Or maybe like one of your musicians or your producer comes out of the woodwork and says, wait, there's no contract here, and I co-wrote some of this. And so these are some of the big problems, right?
Yeah, it sounds like a good way to get a music supervisor fired, right? If they get sued, the film gets sued.
Yeah, and
that's not a good way to build a relationship.
No, and that's the end of your relationship with them, and they all talk amongst themselves. It's a fairly small community, honestly, and that's a great way to completely destroy your sync career. So there's a number of other things that won't get into too depth. So they don't really trust you, not because they don't like you, not that they don't like your music, but they don't want to deal with you. They want to either go, they want it to go through a library, an agent, but we figured out that's like playing a lottery. Or when you come through Sync Songwriter, you go through the song pitch, I teach you everything you need to know about that. And nothing more though. You don't have to become like a, I don't know. You don't have to become like a major expert or professional.
Sure.
You just have to know certain things. So I only do that once a year though. We open every January, so we're closed. I can't accept anybody now, but certainly like during those times, it's you need to know that. And only when the students get through the course and learn all of that, then that's when I introduce them to the supervisors, because they come along as pros. They know everything, that they can talk the lingo. They know everything that works there. So those are 2 big examples of what can go wrong.
Yeah, and you've built trust with them. So you need to make sure that your students that you're handing over there know what they're talking about, know what they're doing, so that you don't lose their trust. Right?
Yes, exactly.
Now, I know you mentioned that like networking, like as far as going to like conferences, might be kind of inefficient. Are there any good conferences or events maybe this year or recurring that you go to or you might recommend to any indie artists?
There are events that I go to, not many. There are only a handful really. I would just even put it down a couple, honestly. And it's just to kind of like have fun and connect face to face with people I already know, right? So that's the thing. And those happen in different places, in different cities and so on. Like the GMS Awards is one of those. That's the Guild of Music Supervisors Awards, where they give the awards out to supervisors and stuff. It's an award show, and you can get a ticket and you can go to that. But the problem is I've done this before with students, is that if they happen to be in town, I've actually met a couple of them there and then paraded them around and introduced them to supervisors. And that would work great. But for someone to go to something like that and just be like, hi, my name's so-and-so, and I'm a musician, and I've got some music. Would you like? They'll be like, I'm busy having my drink, talking to my friends. It's like, it's not the best place. And then those conferences where you go to, where, you go and sit there and listen to them talk on stage, and then you stand in line, to shake their hand and talk to them at the end. I mean, don't forget, there's a lineup of musicians there. And then usually they're handing them a card to download something. I mean, maybe somebody old school will hand them a CD, probably not. They don't even have a player, but they'll hand them something, and then they put it in a bag, and then they walk away. They don't remember who you are. They haven't heard your music yet. It's very not a good way to go, Yeah,
it's important to think of it as a real relationship building. Like, that's not how you make a friend, right? Yeah. By standing in line and be like, hey, will you be my friend? Here's my card.
Yeah.
So you definitely have to think of it as a real relationship.
Yeah. So I would say the surest way to go is to move to a city like I did, and just start networking. And it'll take you, probably years to do it, right? To do it well. And so you've got to kind of make that commitment and do that. So that's where I sort of come in so people don't have to do that. That's why Sync Songwriter exists, because I shortcut all of that stuff, and they just come in, and then I'm essentially introducing them directly face to face with my friends who are music supervisors in TV and film.
That sounds incredible. Now, how do people? So you said you're not open until January. Is there a wait list, or is there anything that they can do to get on there?
Yeah, we have a wait list, and also there's a couple of other things that I have. I have a membership program that people can join and stuff, where it's much more in depth, and you get me live, and I do song reviews with you and everything, and all of that. So that's always ongoing. And so if you download the cheat sheet, whoever downloads the cheat sheet, that for the metadata to make sure that you filled it in correctly, and you, because you have to have that in your track when you submit for TV and film. If you download that, figure out exactly what you need, you're going to get that. And I need to know where to send it to you. So you can just enter your email address. You can be on my list, and I can let you know about all of that other stuff. And you can be in the Sync Songwriter community and potentially, join the membership if you want. And just a quick note, there's so many people out there, right, with courses and stuff online. And I'm sure everyone gets inundated with like emails and stuff like that. I hate spam, and I'm super sensitive to that. And I just want the best for indie artists. Like I've dedicated my life to doing that, my career anyway. And so, if you're not happy, you unsubscribe, and I never like hit you up with stuff that's unnecessary. Like I really want you to be able to do great things with your music and get your music into TV and film. So we're like a family at Sync Songwriters. So don't be freaked out if you're putting your email address like, oh no, they're going to try to sell me a bunch of stuff. It's not the way we work at all.
And I'll testify to that too, because I'm on your list, and I've been for a while, and the videos you do are very authentic, and they're always useful and educational. And a lot of it too is psychological too. Like as far as getting your head in the game and thinking about things in a certain way when it comes to sync too, and just being a musician is in general, mental health and stuff like that. But all of that you kind of incorporate into the videos you share and stuff like that, and it's helped me a lot, and so I appreciate that. And I'm sure a lot of other independent artists would as well. So I definitely encourage everyone to go check that out. Is there any glaring holes that we've missed that you would want independent artists to know about Sync?
I guess the one thing that I think is really important, when you're talking a little bit about mindset, I guess, kind of reminded me of this, is that it's really important to know that there is a place for every kind of music. There's a place in the sync industry. So never think that you're not good enough, right? Your production might not be good enough right now. You can fix that. It's not hard. I teach people how to produce world-class tracks at home, like in my course and stuff. It's not hard. It's just, doing complex things, and you need experience with mixing and all of that. Yes. But to actually get tracks that someone can take and say, yeah, this sounds perfectly good for TV and film, is not rocket science, and it all comes down to the fundamentals and stuff. Anyway, that's something I show. But the bottom line is that you're good enough to get your music into TV and film, even if you don't even have a recording. Like I said, that a woman who brought me that recording on her smartphone and stuff. So don't ever underestimate your ability to do that. And like the Beatles didn't get signed early on because the labels didn't think they were that good. I had Ahmet Ertegun from Atlantic Records come out to one of my shows when I was in a band. He didn't sign me, but which is too bad. But anyway, he was there at the show. And he said his one regret was not signing the Beatles, because he got the demo and he was like, nah, they don't sound that. They're not anything special. And that was like 7 labels said that, and finally George Martin took them under their wing. And he said, even later, he said he didn't do it because he thought they were great. He actually didn't think they were that great either. But the way he put it, he said, whenever they walked into a room, I somehow felt uplifted. And when they left, I felt diminished. And he knew they had something. There was something about them that was special. And that's why he signed them, because he knew that he could take that thing that they had, that spirit that they've got, that, lust for success, and that everything that the way they were together, and he knew he could develop them. And that's the way I want you to think about you and your music. Think about that, it's not a big step to go from the dream and the want. If you really want it, to being able to get your music into a top show, movie, or ad, you can do it if you follow the right steps. The first step is download the metadata guide that's here for free. And otherwise, when you're in the Sync Songwriter world, when you come here, as you were saying, Jack, I'm putting these videos out all the time, free education on what to do, what not to do. You can join the membership if you want and learn all of that pretty quickly. And then you can be on your way. So all of that to say, to put a period on this, it's not like a believe in yourself, you're special kind of talk. It's like, it's one of those things like you can do that. As somebody I heard recently put it, and I thought it was great, is that a lot of people look at the people over there and think, wow, I wish I could be a person over there. You can be that person over there because they were once like you. They're not a lot different. So just remember that.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's beautiful and a great way to wrap this up. I feel like that was awesome. Everybody you can do it. Right. Awesome. Well, thank you, Chris. This has been excellent. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Hey, Jack, thanks for having me on. And really, it was great to hear, I get on a lot of interviews and podcasts and stuff, and people ask me lots of questions and everything, but it was so cool that you were asking me questions, having been a member of, on the community, at least, songwriter, and, and it's so great. So thank you for being a part of the family, and looking forward to, hopefully get together sometime and talking further.
Yeah, it's been great to actually talk to you instead of just the one-way communication to me. Yeah. And like I said, I was really excited about this. So again, thank you so much, and enjoy that Tennessee. How's the weather over there?
It was tempting me at the beginning. I just bought a motorcycle and I was like, oh, spring's coming. It was like 70 degrees, I guess, 3 degrees. And I was like, this is great. And then today it's back down to winter's not letting go quite yet.
Yeah. Well, I'm a wimpy I'm in California, and it's like under 60 degrees. So I'm like, got to get my jacket on.
Yeah. No, I lived there for 13 years. My blood was thin when I came out here. It was like,
oh. I bet. Yeah. Right on, Chris. Thank you so much, man.
All right. Thank you, Jack. Appreciate it.
All right. We'll see you later.
Yep. Bye.